The lawyer slid 2 envelopes across his mahogany desk, one thick and one thin, and I already knew which nightmare I was getting. Before you dive into this story, hit subscribe while you're here. Tomorrow I'm dropping something that's going to leave you speechless. I was 22 years old when my father died, sitting in Edmund Carlisle's law office in the small town of Millbrook, Vermont, next to my older brother Nathan. We'd barely spoken since Dad's funeral 3 days earlier, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. Our relationship had been strained for years, ever since Mom died when I was 14, and Nathan, 6 years older, had left for college and rarely looked back. Dad had been a carpenter, a quiet man who'd built our childhood home with his own hands and spent most of his free time in the old barn behind the house, working on projects he never quite explained. He died suddenly of a heart attack at 63, leaving Nathan and me to figure out what came next. "Your father's estate is straightforward," Mr. Carlisle said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The house, the land, and the bulk of the financial assets go to Nathan as the eldest child and executor of the estate." I felt my chest tighten, but wasn't surprised. Nathan had always been Dad's favorite, the successful son who'd become a corporate lawyer in Boston, who'd done everything right. I'd stayed local, working as a teacher at Millbrook Elementary, visiting Dad every week, helping him with groceries and doctor's appointments. But apparently, loyalty meant less than birth order. "And for you, Claire," Mr. Carlisle continued, sliding the thin envelope toward me, "your father left you the barn and its contents, along with a separate letter he instructed me to give you privately." "The barn?" Nathan scoffed. "That old thing is falling apart. Dad barely used it the last few years." "It's mine to fall apart then," I said coldly, taking the envelope. The meeting ended quickly after that. Nathan got the 3-bedroom house worth around $300,000, Dad's savings account with $42,000, and the 5 acres of property. I got a decrepit barn that probably needed $50,000 in repairs just to be safe to enter. Outside the office, Nathan caught my arm. "Look, Claire, if you need money, I can help you out. I know the barn isn't exactly—" "I don't need your charity," I cut him off, pulling away. "Dad left me what he wanted me to have." I drove to Dad's house. My house now, I supposed, at least for the next 30 days, until Nathan officially took possession. The property sat at the end of a winding dirt road, surrounded by maple trees that were just starting to turn brilliant shades of red and orange in the early October air. The house was classic New England, white clapboard with green shutters, built by Dad's hands over the course of 2 years back in 1983. But it was the barn that drew my attention. It stood about 100 feet behind the house, a massive structure painted deep red that had faded to rust in places. Dad had bought the barn from a farmer in 1976, had it disassembled and rebuilt on this property before he even built the house. Mom used to joke that Dad loved that barn more than anything except his family. I'd spent countless hours in there as a child, watching Dad work on furniture, cabinets, intricate wooden toys. But around the time Mom got sick, Dad started locking it, saying it wasn't safe for me anymore. I'd been hurt by the exclusion, especially during those terrible months of Mom's cancer treatment when I desperately needed distraction. After Mom died, Dad became even more protective of the barn. He'd spend entire weekends out there, emerging only for meals, his hands covered in sawdust, his eyes distant and sad. When I asked what he was working on, he'd just say, "Something important, sweetheart. You'll understand someday." I guess someday was now. I sat in my car, staring at the barn and holding the envelope Mr. Carlyle had given me. Inside was a single key and a letter in Dad's familiar handwriting, slightly shaky from the tremor he'd developed in his last year. "My dearest Claire," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably confused about why I left you what seems like the worst part of my estate. Nathan got the house because that's what he values: security, status, the appearance of success. But you, my sweet girl, you got the barn because that's where the truth lives. I know I shut you out of the barn after your mother died, and I'm sorry for that. But I was protecting something precious, something that needed to be finished before I could share it with you. Inside the barn, you'll find my life's real work, not the furniture I sold or the cabinets I installed. You'll find the secret I kept, even from Nathan, the legacy your mother and I built together. The key opens the main door, but there's another door at the back of the workshop behind the tool cabinet. That key is hidden in the top drawer of Mom's old jewelry box, the one I kept in my bedroom. You'll need both keys to understand everything. I'm sorry I couldn't be here to explain this myself. I'm sorry for so many things, but I trust you, Claire. I always have. You're the one who stayed, who cared, who understood that family isn't about obligation. It's about showing up. This is my way of showing up for you, even now. The barn is yours to do with, as you wish, but I hope you'll see it for what it really is, a gift of truth, love, and possibility. All my love, Dad. My hands trembled as I reread the letter. A secret? A legacy? I'd spent the last 8 years thinking Dad had shut me out because I reminded him too much of Mom, or because I'd somehow disappointed him by staying in Millbrook instead of chasing bigger dreams like Nathan. I got out of the car and walked toward the barn, the key clutched in my hand. The door was heavy, solid oak that Dad had planed and fitted himself. It swung open with a groan that echoed in the vast interior. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating a space that took my breath away. The main area was exactly as I remembered. Dad's workshop with workbenches along the walls, tools hanging in precise organization, and the smell of wood and oil that had defined my childhood. But everything was immaculately clean, as if Dad had prepared it for someone to find. I walked slowly through the space, running my hands over surfaces I hadn't touched in years. There were pieces of furniture in various stages of completion: a rocking chair, a dining table, a bookshelf with intricate carvings. But they all looked abandoned, like Dad had stopped working on them months or even years ago. The tool cabinet was exactly where I remembered it, a massive oak structure with dozens of drawers and compartments. I pulled at it experimentally and was surprised when it moved easily, mounted on some kind of sliding mechanism. Behind it was a door I'd never known existed, painted the same color as the barn's interior walls, almost invisible if you didn't know to look for it. I needed the second key. I left the barn and went into the house, climbing the stairs to Dad's bedroom. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The bed neatly made, his reading glasses on the nightstand, Mom's photograph on the dresser. Next to it was her jewelry box, a beautiful walnut piece that Dad had made for their 10th anniversary. Inside, beneath a tangle of necklaces and earrings that Dad had never been able to give away, I found it, a small brass key on a chain with a tag that read, "For Claire, when she's ready." My heart was pounding as I returned to the barn. The second key fit perfectly into the hidden door's lock. When I pushed it open, I found myself at the top of a staircase leading down into darkness. My hand fumbled along the wall until I found a light switch. The lights flickered on, revealing something impossible. The barn had a basement, a huge underground space that shouldn't exist, and it was filled, wall to wall, with the most extraordinary collection I'd ever seen. There were paintings, hundreds of them, stacked on racks, hanging on walls, propped on easels. Sculptures occupied every corner, ranging from small carved figures to life-sized pieces. Shelves held sketchbooks, journals, and what looked like portfolios of artwork. And in the center of the room stood a large work table covered with art supplies, brushes, paints, and half-finished canvases. I walked down the stairs in a daze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The paintings were extraordinary, filled with emotion and technical skill that took my breath away. Landscapes of Vermont in every season, portraits of people I didn't recognize, abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with energy and grief and hope. And then I saw it, a portrait of my mother, so lifelike I gasped. She was sitting in a garden, sunlight on her face, smiling with the joy I remembered from before she got sick. The detail was incredible, every strand of hair, every laugh line around her eyes. In the bottom right corner was a signature I didn't recognize. Elena Mitchell, 2007. Elena Mitchell. Not my mother's name. My mother was Sarah Harper before she married Dad. I picked up one of the sketchbooks from a nearby shelf, my hands shaking. Inside were pencil drawings, practice sketches, studies of light and shadow. And on the first page, written in handwriting I knew but had never seen in this context, were the words, Elena Mitchell Portfolio, 1998 to 2012. Elena Mitchell was my mother. I sank onto a stool, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My mother had been an artist, a real artist, with enough work here to fill multiple gallery shows. But I'd never known. She'd never told me. We'd never had art supplies in the house, never visited galleries, never discussed her having any kind of artistic career. I spent the next hour going through the space, finding more and more impossible things. There were letters from galleries, some requesting shows, others thanking Elena Mitchell for submissions. There were art magazines with articles bookmarked, reviews of shows, profiles of artists, calls for entries. There was even a folder of receipts showing sales of paintings, some for thousands of dollars, all dated before I was born. In a filing cabinet, I found a journal. My mother's handwriting filled page after page, documenting her artistic journey, her struggles, her triumphs. I sat on the floor and began to read, tears streaming down my face as Mom's voice came alive through her words. January 3rd, 1994. One entry read, "Sold 3 paintings at the Boston Gallery today." Marcus said, "My work is transcendent," whatever that means. I just paint what I feel, what I see. David is proud, but I can tell he's worried about how much time I'm spending in the studio. We've been talking about starting a family, and he's concerned that I won't be able to balance art and motherhood. Maybe he's right. Maybe something will have to give. I flipped forward, finding entries from after Nathan was born. September 20th, 1995. Nathan is 6 months old, and I haven't painted in 4 months. Every time I try to get to the studio, he needs something. David helps when he can, but his carpentry business is taking off and he's working 60-hour weeks. I feel like I'm disappearing, like the artist I was is being erased by diapers and feeding schedules. I love Nathan desperately, but I'm grieving the loss of who I used to be. More entries chronicled her struggle to maintain her identity as an artist while raising Nathan. Some were hopeful, documenting stolen hours in the studio. Others were darker, filled with resentment and guilt about feeling resentful. Then I found the entry that changed everything. March 7th, 2000. I'm pregnant again. David is thrilled. Nathan is excited to be a big brother. And I'm terrified. I barely managed to keep painting with one child. How will I do it with two? Marcus called yesterday about a show in New York, a real opportunity, the kind that could establish my career nationally. But it's scheduled for 8 months from now, right around my due date. I told him I couldn't do it. I hung up the phone and cried for 3 hours. I feel like I'm choosing between being a mother and being myself, and society tells me there's only one acceptable choice. What comes next is something I never saw coming. Stick with me and make sure you subscribe. I kept reading, watching my mother's artistic dreams slowly die under the weight of family obligations and social expectations. After I was born in November 2000, the entries became less frequent, shorter, filled with exhaustion and resignation. January 12th, 2002. Claire is 14 months old. I haven't painted in over a year. David built me a beautiful studio space in the barn basement. Spent months on it, trying to encourage me to start again. But every time I go down there, I just stare at blank canvases and feel empty. The artist I was is gone. I'm a mother now. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be. But then something shifted. The entries from 2005 showed a rekindling of passion. June 4th, 2005. Claire is in kindergarten now, and Nathan started middle school. I have hours during the day when the house is empty. David encouraged me to try painting again, said the barn studio is still there, waiting. So today I went down and picked up a brush for the first time in 3 years. I painted for 5 hours straight, lost in it the way I used to be. When I finished, I looked at what I'd created and didn't recognize it. It was raw, painful, angry, so different from my earlier work. David said it was the most powerful thing I'd ever done. I think I'm finding a new voice, one that comes from the years of sacrifice and silence. The next several years of entries documented my mother's return to art. She painted during school hours, kept her work secret from Nathan and me, exhibited under her maiden name, so no one in our small town would connect Elena Mitchell the artist to Sarah Harper, the teacher's wife. She and Dad had created this entire hidden world in the barn basement, a space where she could be herself without judgment or expectation. Her work evolved, becoming more powerful and personal. She painted about motherhood, identity, the invisible labor of women, the cost of choosing between passion and duty. Galleries in Boston and New York began showing her work regularly. By 2008, she was earning a substantial income, enough that Dad was able to cut back his carpentry hours to help more with Nathan and me. But she never told us. The journal explained why. March 15th, 2009. Claire asked me today what I do during the day while she's at school. I told her I volunteer at the library and run errands. The lie came so easily it scared me. But how do I explain to my 10-year-old daughter that Mommy has a secret life? That I've been hiding who I really am because I'm afraid of being judged? David thinks I should tell the kids, let them see this part of me. But Nathan is already pulling away, becoming a teenager who finds everything we do embarrassing. And Claire is so sweet, so attached to me. I don't want to complicate her image of who I am. Besides, what if they see my paintings? So many of them are about the pain of motherhood, the resentment I felt in those early years. What if they think I didn't want them? I pressed the journal to my chest, sobbing. Mom had hidden her true self because she was afraid we wouldn't understand, afraid we'd be hurt by the complicated truth that she loved us and also mourned the artist she'd had to become silent to raise us. The final entries were from 2012, after Mom's cancer diagnosis, April 2nd, 2012. The doctor says I have 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. I'm 47 years old, and I'm dying. David is devastated. The kids don't know yet. We're waiting until after Nathan graduates college. I went to the barn today and looked at everything I've created. 27 years of work, hundreds of paintings, a whole career I kept secret because I was afraid. And now I'm running out of time to decide what to do with it. May 20th, 2012. I've made my decision. The work stays hidden until after I'm gone. David will preserve it, keep the barn studio intact, and when Claire is old enough, when she's lived enough of her own life to understand, David will give it all to her. Not Nathan. He's so much like me in my younger days, chasing success and recognition, trying to prove himself to the world. He wouldn't understand why I hid this. But Claire, my sweet Claire who stayed close, who chose a quiet life of meaning over big ambitions, she'll understand. She'll know that sometimes the most important parts of ourselves are the ones we protect most fiercely. The barn and everything in it will be her inheritance, her permission to be complex and contradictory, to be both the person the world expects and the person she really is. The journal ended there. I sat in the underground studio surrounded by my mother's secret life and understood why Dad had given this to me. Nathan got the house because that's what he could understand. Tangible assets, real estate value, the things you could put on a balance sheet. But I got the barn because I could understand what it represented. The truth that people are more complicated than they appear, that love and resentment can coexist, that women, especially mothers, often have to hide pieces of themselves just to survive in a world that demands they be one-dimensional. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into cataloging Mom's work. I took time off from teaching, camping out in Dad's house during my last days before Nathan took possession. I photographed every painting, read every journal entry, organized decades of documentation. I also called galleries, reaching out to the contacts Mom had maintained under her pseudonym. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Elena Mitchell, one gallery owner in Boston, said reverently, "I haven't heard that name in years. I assumed she'd stopped working after 2012. You're saying there's more work?" I explained who I was, who Elena Mitchell really was. By the time I finished telling Mom's story, the gallery owner was crying. "This is extraordinary," she said. "The narrative alone. A mother and artist hiding her work for years, creating this entire secret career. Combined with the quality of the work itself, this could be a major exhibition. Would you be willing to consider a show? I would. I wanted the world to see what my mother had created, what she'd sacrificed to create it. But more than that, I wanted other women to see themselves in her story, to feel less alone in their own contradictions and hidden selves. Nathan came by the house one afternoon while I was packing up my things. He found me in the barn, surrounded by paintings I was carefully wrapping for transport. "What is all this?" he asked, stunned. I explained everything, showed him Mom's work, her journals, the years of secret artistic life she'd maintained. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, confusion, and finally something that looked like grief. "She never told us," he said quietly, picking up a small painting of a woman at a window, her face half in shadow. "Why didn't she trust us to understand?" "Because she was afraid," I said. "Afraid of being judged. Afraid we'd think her art meant she loved us less. Afraid of all the things women are made to fear when they want something beyond traditional roles." Nathan was silent for a long time, studying painting after painting. "This changes everything I thought I knew about Mom," he finally said. "About why Dad was always so protective of this barn. About why you stayed close and I ran away. I thought I was living up to their expectations by being successful, but maybe I was just running from the complexity of who they really were." "Maybe we both were," I said, "but now we have a chance to really see them, to honor all of who they were, not just the parts that were comfortable." The exhibition was scheduled for March of the following year at a prominent gallery in Boston. I spent months working with curators to tell Mom's story properly, balancing her artistic achievements with the context of why she'd kept them hidden. We included excerpts from her journals, photographs of the barn studio, and testimonies from women artists about the unique challenges of balancing creative work with family expectations. The opening was overwhelming. Hundreds of people came, and the response was powerful. Critics praised Mom's technical skill and emotional honesty, but it was the everyday women who moved me most. Mothers and daughters who stood crying in front of paintings that expressed things they'd never been able to articulate. Women who saw themselves in my mother's struggle, who felt validated in their own contradictions. Nathan came to the opening, bringing his wife and their 2 young kids. I watched him explain paintings to his 7-year-old daughter, talking about how Grandma had been an artist, how she'd had dreams and talents beyond being a mother, how people were allowed to be complicated. "I get it now," he told me afterward. "Why Dad left you the barn. It wasn't about the monetary value, it was about trust. He trusted you to understand Mom, to honor her truth, to do something meaningful with her legacy. I would have tried to quantify it, monetize it, but you saw it for what it really was." "It's not too late to understand," I said. "They're both gone, but their story is still here. We can choose how to carry it forward." The exhibition traveled to galleries in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago over the next 2 years. Sales of Mom's paintings generated significant income, which I used to establish a foundation supporting women artists, particularly mothers trying to maintain creative careers. I also turned the barn into a residency program, offering women artists a place to work without distraction or judgment, a space where they could be fully themselves. I quit teaching and became the director of the foundation and residency program, finally understanding why I'd always felt called to stay in Millbrook. I'd been waiting, though I didn't know it, to uncover this truth, to create this legacy from Mom's hidden life. The barn, which I'd initially thought was the worthless part of my inheritance, became the most valuable thing I'd ever received. Not because of its monetary worth, though selling Mom's paintings had certainly secured my financial future, but because it gave me permission to be complicated, to contain multitudes, to honor the parts of myself that didn't fit into easy categories. I still have Dad's letter, the one that started this journey. Sometimes I read it and cry, grateful that he understood me well enough to give me not what looked valuable, but what actually was. The barn wasn't falling apart. It was holding up the weight of an entire secret history, preserving truth until I was ready to carry it forward. And every time I watch women artists arrive at the barn for their residencies, carrying their own contradictions and hidden dreams, I think about Mom painting in secret, Dad building her a sanctuary, and how love sometimes looks like protecting someone's right to be more than one thing. Nathan got the house, $300,000 worth of property that he eventually sold for a nice profit. But I got the barn, and inside it, I found something worth infinitely more. The truth about who we come from, the permission to be complex, and the responsibility to help other women find their own hidden studios where their fullest selves can finally breathe. Thank you so much for listening to this story about inheritance, hidden truths, and the complicated legacy of women's dreams. If this touched you, please subscribe to this channel and join our community. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about a family member that completely changed how you saw them? Have you hidden parts of yourself because you were afraid of judgment? Share your story with us. And tell me, what would you have done if you'd inherited that barn? Click on one of the stories on your screen to hear another tale of unexpected discoveries. And remember, the most valuable things we inherit aren't always the ones that look good on paper.